They look like any other Europeans. Pale skin, freckles, red hair scattered like embers in the wind. Yet beneath the surface of the Irish people lies a genetic puzzle that has defied explanation for decades. Deep in their DNA are markers that don't quite match with any known ancient population. They stand apart, an outlier in the genetic map of Europe. And no one really knows why. When scientists began mapping the human genome in the late 20th century, they expected the Irish to show similarities with the British or the French. After all, these were their closest neighbors, geographically and historically. But what they found shocked the scientific community. The Irish genetic code contained traces of an ancient lineage, one older than Stonehenge, older even than the Egyptian pyramids. Whispers of an isolated people, a prehistoric migration, or perhaps a civilization lost to time. From the windswept cliffs of Donegal to the ancient tombs of Newgrange, the question echoes louder than ever. Why is Irish DNA so mysteriously unique? And what secrets could it be hiding about the origins of Europe itself? To truly understand the mystery woven into Irish DNA, we must go back, far beyond the age of kings and castles, deep into the mists of prehistory. Ireland, isolated by the cold waters of the Atlantic, was one of the last places in Europe to be settled by humans. Archaeological evidence places the first human footprints on Irish soil around 10,000 years ago, shortly after the end of the last ice age. But here's where the story turns strange. Unlike other parts of Europe, where waves of migration from the east gradually reshaped the genetic makeup of the people, Ireland appears to have resisted these changes. Genetic studies show that modern Irish people are more closely related to the ancient farmers and hunter-gatherers who first arrived on the island than to most modern Europeans. It's as if time stood still. While the rest of the continent was being reshaped by empires, invasions, and migrations, from the Romans to the Moors to the Vikings, Ireland remained genetically untouched. And yet, it wasn't completely isolated. The island endured Viking raids, Norman invasions, and centuries of British rule. So why didn't these events leave deeper marks on the Irish genome? Why does their DNA still whisper of a world before written language, before metal tools, before cities? A 2017 study by researchers at Trinity College Dublin revealed that certain genetic traits found in modern Irish populations are nearly identical to those in human remains dating back over 5,000 years. The scale of this preservation is almost unheard of in Europe. It's a biological time capsule, silent but stubborn. Something, or someone, preserved this ancient code. But who were these first people? And how did their legacy survive for millennia, while the world around them changed beyond recognition? The breakthrough came not from a castle or a crypt, but from a remote burial site on a windswept hill in County Antrim. In 2006, archaeologists unearthed the remains of a woman buried over 5,000 years ago in a Neolithic tomb. Her bones were fragile, weathered by time, but preserved enough to allow for something extraordinary: a full mitochondrial DNA extraction. What the scientists discovered left them speechless. Her genetic signature, classified as haplogroup U5b1b1, was ancient. Not just ancient, but shockingly similar to that of modern Irish women living in rural counties today. It was as if this prehistoric woman had simply stepped out of the mist and into the 21st century. But she wasn't alone. Other remains began to tell the same story. Across the island, from the passage tombs of Loughcrew to the coastal cairns of Sligo, the pattern repeated. Time and again, the DNA of Ireland's distant dead matched the living. These weren't isolated incidents or random mutations. This was a clear genetic continuum. a silent inheritance passed from generation to generation across 5 millennia. It defied expectations. Most European populations had undergone massive genetic turnovers due to migration waves, plagues, wars. But in Ireland, the line had held. This was the first major clue, a prehistoric fingerprint buried beneath layers of soil and time. And yet, it raised more questions than it answered. Who were these early inhabitants that left such a deep genetic imprint? How did they resist the tides of history that reshaped every other land? The hunt for answers was about to begin, not just with shovels and maps, but with cutting-edge science. The team at Trinity College Dublin, led by geneticist Dr. Lara Cassidy, began assembling one of the most ambitious genetic maps ever created for the island. Their goal was simple, yet monumental: to trace the genomic history of the Irish people, bone by bone, bloodline by bloodline. Working with ancient remains and modern samples collected from over 1,000 volunteers, many from families who had lived in the same counties for centuries, they initiated a genome-wide analysis unlike anything attempted before in Ireland. Every nucleotide, every chromosomal segment was mapped, compared, and cross-referenced with ancient populations across Europe and beyond. What emerged was a genetic mosaic, complex, haunting, and unlike anything they had anticipated. The challenge was immense. Ancient DNA is notoriously fragile, often degraded by moisture, bacteria, and time. Even the most well-preserved bones yield only fragments, tiny molecular fossils. Researchers had to develop new methods to isolate and amplify the remaining sequences. Contamination was a constant threat. One misplaced breath in a lab could skew an entire result. And even when clean data was obtained, interpreting it was a puzzle in itself. The Irish genome contained signatures that matched not only with early European farmers, but with an even older group, Mesolithic hunter-gatherers whose DNA seemed to vanish from the rest of Europe but persisted here. Meanwhile, linguistic experts joined the investigation. Could the Irish language, one of the oldest living tongues in Europe, contain echoes of this deep ancestry? Could ancient myths, like those found in the Libor Gabala Eren, the Book of Invasions, hold symbolic truths about real genetic history? It became clear that this wasn't just a scientific quest, but a multidisciplinary odyssey, fusing biology, archaeology, history, and folklore into a single compelling mystery. Each discovery peeled back another layer of the enigma. But the biggest revelation was still to come, buried deep in the genome, waiting to be decoded. In 2017, the research team published a peer-reviewed study that shook the foundations of European genetic history. After sequencing the genomes of 10 ancient individuals buried in passage tombs like Newgrange, they uncovered something completely unexpected. One of the individuals, a male child buried deep within the sacred heart of the tomb, had signs of first-degree incest in his DNA. Genetically, his parents were either siblings or parent and child. In modern ethics, this would be a disturbing anomaly. But in ancient anthropology, it meant something entirely different: royalty. This single DNA profile revealed a prehistoric elite class that practiced extreme endogamy to preserve bloodlines, similar to the pharaohs of Egypt or the divine kings of ancient Mesopotamia. But this was in Ireland, 5,000 years ago. The implications were staggering. This wasn't a scattered tribal society. This was an organized hierarchical civilization, sophisticated enough to bury its leaders in massive stone tombs aligned with solar cycles, and powerful enough to enforce strict dynastic purity. And the royal blood, it never left. Genetic markers of that same lineage, although diluted, persist in the Irish genome today. That royal child may be long gone, but echoes of his DNA live on, in the people walking the streets of Dublin, Cork, and Galway. Further analysis revealed even more, a distinct ancestral component in the Irish genome not seen elsewhere in Western Europe. It didn't match Anglo-Saxon, Norse, or even early Celtic DNA. Instead, it linked distantly to populations found in the Pontic steppe, and even farther east. A signal of an early, forgotten migration, perhaps one of the first into Europe. Ancient blood carried west by people who disappeared from the historical record, but not from the genetic one. Science had spoken. The Irish genome wasn't just unique. It was ancient royalty mixed with a mysterious origin predating written history. Imagine the wind-swept coasts of Ireland over 6,000 years ago. A dense forest cloaks the land. The only sounds are the cries of seabirds, the rustle of leaves, and the quiet footsteps of the first settlers, small groups of Neolithic farmers arriving by sea, their boats made of animal hide and wood, their eyes scanning an untouched, mystical land. They carry with them seeds, livestock, and a genetic legacy that would remain frozen in time. These early migrants, likely from Anatolia via Spain and Brittany, brought the first wave of agriculture to Ireland. But they brought more than tools. They brought a bloodline, one so genetically distinct it would survive virtually unchanged while the rest of Europe morphed under the weight of conquest and migration. Centuries later, another wave came. Hunter-gatherers from the west of Europe, possibly descendants of Ice Age survivors. Instead of conflict, there was merging. Their DNA mixed with the early farmers, but not diluted. Instead, it reinforced a genetic structure uniquely suited to the island's isolation. Then, from the steppes of Eurasia, a third people arrived, tall, with light skin and blue eyes, riding horses and wielding bronze. These were the Proto-Celts. But unlike in Britain or the mainland, they didn't dominate the gene pool. In Ireland, they assimilated. Over millennia, while empires rose and fell across Europe, Ireland remained a geographic outlier. No Roman legions ever set foot here. The Viking and Norman invasions were brutal but limited. And despite centuries of English rule, rural Ireland, especially in the West, held fast to its ancestral blood. Isolation became a form of genetic preservation. Oral traditions, clan systems, and geographic barriers like bogs and mountains acted like time capsules, protecting an ancient legacy that elsewhere had long faded. What emerged was a living relic, a population whose DNA is a window into the Neolithic world. The Irish didn't just inherit their ancestors' land, they inherited their very code. The DNA of the Irish is not just a record of ancestry, it is a living fossil, a whisper from a forgotten world that still echoes in the blood of millions. Every freckle, every red strand of hair, every genetic quirk passed quietly through generations speaks of ancient farmers, sacred dynasties, and lost migrations buried beneath layers of myth and stone. In a world where most peoples have been genetically reshaped by empire, plague, and globalization, Ireland remains a genetic time capsule, preserved by geography, protected by culture, and revealed only by the tools of modern science. But the mystery is far from over. The discovery of royal incest in the Newgrange child opens up unsettling questions. Who were these prehistoric elites? Did they rule like pharaohs, claiming divine blood? And how much of their legacy lives on, not just in DNA, but in the stories, the language, the land itself? The Irish genome may be ancient, but it's not static. With every new discovery, more layers are peeled back, more secrets revealed. And somewhere, perhaps in a dusty bone beneath a forgotten cairn, the next clue is waiting. So next time you hear a Gaelic word, walk along the cliffs of Moher. or see the Celtic spiral etched into stone. Remember, you're not just looking at culture. You're staring into the genetic memory of a civilization older than written history. If this journey into deep time fascinated you, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell so you never miss a mystery waiting to be uncovered. There are more secrets in our DNA than we've ever imagined, and this is just the beginning.